What are you trying to create from 3ev 3eco?
We want to scale. The addressable market for our services is well in excess of 160 billion US dollars just in India alone.
Why did you choose both the business wherein it's really difficult to build two businesses at a time?
If I have a four-wheel light commercial vehicle, let's say a Tata Ace, and it breaks down, 10 people are there in 5 minutes to fix it. If there's an EV and I have a problem, it stops working, in 10 days, nobody has shown up. There's no marketplace. EV company, Tesla, when they set out to grow that business 20 years ago, they had no dealers. Tesla had to fund and build their own dealerships. There was no insurance company. It was not just about building a product and then assuming because of government subsidies, because of government targets, because of customers. We didn't put any stock in that as a driver of demand of our business. We knew only when the customer was convinced and confident, that's when we would be able to penetrate the market with our products. The most important thing for operating an EV fleet is utilization.
Are you using any other technology apart from the size of the battery to extend the range of the vehicle?
The transition from ICE to EVs is not a simple substitution of a petrol-powered motor with an electric motor, and then you just assume.
How do you see electric vehicle market in next 5 years?
India is not my original home, but it's definitely my home in my heart and in my mind and in my business. I've made a huge commitment financially and professionally to India's future, particularly the EV industry. So it's very important. I think about it all the time. Success for us is not an option. We're not gambling. We're not speculating. We will never give up.
Hello, everyone. So, welcome to another episode of the Vision Grid. And we are tapping the EV industry one by one. And today we have an amazing personality here, Peter Voelkner. So, how are you doing, Peter?
Very well. Thank you so much for inviting me for this podcast. It's a real honor to have this discussion with you. I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Lovely. Peter, I'm very, very curious to understand from you complete career. I could not see a trace when I see your LinkedIn profile. From you have worked in New York, you have worked in Hong Kong. I could not find a
Yes.
trace of India. And suddenly, what I see is a person from a foreign country comes to India and taps an opportunity, I would say, and starts a business or a startup into EV industry.
Yes.
And so, I want to understand what is your connection with India, so that we go on the background and understand better from your.
Sure, sure. I can go back also and just personalize it a little bit, talk about
Yes.
myself and how I got here, because I'm currently 55 years old. And I first became an entrepreneur 10 years ago when I was 45 years old. And that's what brought me to India from Hong Kong, where I was working at the time. But for the 20 years before that, I was working as an investment professional in New York City. I'm a US citizen, but I'm the son of two immigrants. My father is German, my mother is Filipino from the Philippines. And actually, I was brought up from the earliest days. My father was an economist in the United Nations. And my first memory is living in Africa. We were living in Ethiopia in 1973, 74, right at the time that there was a revolution there. So it was, interesting background. But then we lived in Asia, we lived in Far East Asia, in parts of Europe, obviously with non-US parents. I've always had a very global perspective. And that's not only when it comes to economies, and I studied economics as an undergrad, and I got my MBA as well in New York City. Not only from that standpoint, but even more importantly, from a people perspective. Seeing people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, all nationalities, all languages, many times where I didn't speak the language, but I was there anyway, trying to fit in. And having that as my background, going back to the earliest days of my life as a child, really gave me an appreciation for all different cultures, all different locations, and the opportunities to engage and the eagerness to engage and find ways to have an impact and to connect with people so that together, we could create something that I could participate in, right? And My father was an economist at the UN for many decades. Then he also became a businessman. That's why he was living in Hong Kong, where he was running a photovoltaic business. And I followed in his footsteps in a way, where the first 20 years I was an investment professional, ending as a portfolio manager at quite a large hedge fund in New York, but then decided that I wanted to become an entrepreneur, start businesses. And after studying companies for 20 odd years, very intensively, due diligence, meeting with managements, investing in them over long periods of time on behalf of our investors, I wanted to put into practice some of those things that I observed and learned. What were good managers? What were good businesses? What were the trends that I thought, were exciting in the marketplace for business, for development? And specifically to answer your question, when it comes to India, yeah, I didn't have a background in India. I was in Sri Lanka when I was 7 years old, but that doesn't count. Uh, I didn't have a background in India, but in one of my jobs, we had quite a large portfolio in India. When I was working at Sansar Capital in 2008 to 2010. And I kept some very good friends and relationships with the portfolio managers and analysts who were responsible for investing in India. And that was quite some time ago. But I had a basic understanding of the lay of the land in India. What were the opportunities? What were maybe some of the challenges? And it gave me the confidence to come to India in 2015, understanding there were very powerful demographic trends, the age of the population, the trajectory that was going on with a relatively new government at that time. And we've seen the successes that have been achieved since then. Also, some of the specific aspects within India that were compatible with my needs. English is a nationally recognized language. The education level is extremely sophisticated within India and internationally. The skill set was at a very high level. And in some cases, when it was domestically focused, it needed to benefit from international standards, global standards of business operations, strategy, and development. And that's where I felt that coming in as an outsider, sort of a non Indian national, with an experience as a financial analyst, as an investor, and approaching the challenge of being an entrepreneur in India as a foreigner. How do you do foreign direct investment? It was my own funds, my personal resources that I used to start these businesses. How do we go about creating a long-term, sustainable, impactful, and scalable business? So I came in with certain ideas. I learned a lot of things in the early days where I was wrong, where I needed to change my thinking. But ultimately, it has led to the creation of three companies, the last of which is 3eco Systems, founded in 2020, which is a local logistics company operating a pure EV fleet and serving mostly enterprise level customers across 5 cities in India today.
Lovely, amazing. I have been in Bangalore for 15 plus years, and I have fortunately visited your plant when I was
Right.
trying to propose our batteries for you. And I saw two things that I observed. One was culture in the company, the way the people treated when we went there, when we went inside, and most beautiful thing that I liked is the plant was so well maintained. Things were happening in a very organized manner. I want to understand one particular aspect: doing businesses rest of the world versus doing business in India.
Yes.
What were your initial glitches that you faced, and what are what did you learn specifically? 2 3 points if you can share with us. And over a period of time, how did you improve on it, or how did you manage with those things?
That's a big question. I could spend a half a day trying to answer the question. So and it's really in two parts. There's the sort of philosophical aspect in terms of answering the question, and then there's the practical aspect. What do we actually do in order to maintain a well run organization? Philosophically speaking, because that's the background of establishing the culture. And culture is critical for having sustainable behavior, right? Building a platform for success. Culture is always important for that. So there has to be some philosophical content. Trust is the most important thing. Trust is the thing that raises people from a commodity type activity. And what I mean by commodity means we can replace you. You're just a commodity. I can also be replaced. I'm just a commodity, you know. Replacing that mentality with loyalty, with a mission orientation, with a long term commitment and belief in mutual benefits. Trust is required for that. And I did not want to build a company that was based on commodity based exploitation. I did not see that as a sustainable long term value creating model. In order to have a business that has trust, that has sustainability, not environmental sustainability, sustainability in terms of profits, in terms of success in the marketplace with customers, in terms of continuous improvement and innovation, sustainability in that sense, sustainability as an organization, and confidently looking into our future. In order to build that with a foundation of trust, we needed to have a rules based model. And those rules had to be clear, they needed to be fair, and there had to be a feedback loop of transparency and accountability. When that's the goal, you know, where we are trying to create a space in which people can come, establish trust, build loyalty to our organization in order to build confidence in their own futures. It starts with, you know, respecting the company, trying to make it clear that this company is here to generate benefits for all stakeholders. Normally we think of shareholders. Well, companies exist to make profits for shareholders. And while that is a true principle in capitalism, the reality is that we shouldn't all just be subservient to shareholders, that that's not the only authority that we answer to. We have a responsibility, of course, to our customers. We have a responsibility, of course, to our staff. We have a responsibility to our government regulators. And when these responsibilities are taken seriously, building a internally consistent model of compliance, of transparency, then produces that sustainable trust, which we can grow the business on. When people think that they are just joining our team on a purely transactional basis, I'm here because you pay me, you're only going to get this much out of them. When people believe that you are actually invested in their future and that they should be invested in the company's future, we can get a lot more performance, a lot more commitment and reliability out of the team. And it's not just philosophical. You know, we have ESOPs, employee stock option plans, in all of the companies that I'm associated with, and they're broadly distributed. The first company that I started, Rugged Solar Products Private Limited, in Bangalore, in Dodbalapur, on the north side of Bangalore near the Kempagawa airport. You know, we assigned, and this is a closely held company. So this is, you know, we haven't had any institutional investors. This is really me and a small group of local partners, local Indian partner investors. You know, we were giving ESOPs even to the maintenance staff in the early days because we wanted to have this sense of community where we were building something with a different attitude within the organization. And we have had extremely strong levels of loyalty and commitment where the turnover in our staff, I don't know what the averages are for the industry, but you know, the factory manager who's becoming a GM, his name is Manjunatha. I first met him in 2015. We started the company in 2017. He's been with me for that entire journey, and I think he'll be leading the company for the next 10 years. Same thing with Deepak Ram, our assistant factory manager and chief mechanical engineer. Same thing with Pallavi, our HR manager, which is a critical job position. Obviously, when we're creating an organization based on trust, the HR manager is not just an administrator of salaries and recruiting. They're really there to also set the tone in terms of culture and communicate with the staff in terms of what the long-term commitment and mission of the company is. And that really carried through from Rugged, which was and to this day remains primarily an export-oriented company.
Okay.
And then in 2019, when I started 3ev Industries, many of the learnings from Rugged and many of the sort of cultural foundations of
Mm.
building trust and building a sustainable business were transferred into 3ev at the outset. And in fact, 3ev sits right next to Rugged, also in Dodbalapur in Bangalore. That's where our
Yeah.
manufacturing plant is. We're now at 140, 1.4 lakh square feet of manufacturing space under roof, and we plan on continuing to expand. And then it even further carried through to 3 ecosystems, which was founded in 2020. And there, that was really almost like a quantum leap when we start talking about building two manufacturing OEMs, one in the photovoltaic solar space, Rugged Solar, the next in the EV mobility space, 3ev Industries. Moving into 3 ecosystems, because we operate a large fleet of electric vehicles, each
Mm.
requiring a driver, obviously. And these drivers are staff, they are fully salaried. Taking the numbers that are needed, more than 1,500 today of these drivers on our rolls and managing them as members of our team, that was a huge challenge. But we have remained consistent in our commitment to treating all of our stakeholders, so that includes our drivers, as
Yeah.
partners, as loyal teammates. And even though sometimes the attitude coming in is transactional, it's not based on trust, it's not based on kind of a history or an experience where maybe there's been mutual respect in the past that they've experienced. That takes some time to deal with when they come and try to function within our system, but we stay with it. We don't pivot. That's one thing about our businesses also: continuity, consistency, almost like a stubborn drive not to compromise. That's also part of our culture.
That's so amazing. I just want to keep listening to these things for a longer time. But the thing is, what you are creating, it's what I can feel while I'm discussing. It's directly coming from your heart, and I could see that when I visited your plant. So,
Thank you.
Peter, my question next is, over a period of like next 5 years, say 2031, 2030, what are you trying to create? How do you see 3EV and 3Eco over next 5 years?
Well, what I set out to do when I came to India 10 years ago was not to operate three different companies or even two different companies. To be the chairman and managing director. Chairman, maybe yes, but managing director, that was not the long term goal. It was to design and build and create sustainable businesses that could scale based on the people, the strategy, the resources, the market opportunity that we saw in these two businesses, 3ev and 3 ecosystems, both focused on EV mobility in their different ways. Of course, I would like to hopefully make them very successful so that I can personally benefit from that. And one of my personal goals is to maybe have a place in Goa where I can retire with my wife. Lovely place. It gets cold in the winters here in the United States, so being able to go back and forth and have a base in India, that's something that personally I would welcome. But that's not for me to be the hands-on manager of the businesses for the next 20 years, which I'm fully capable of doing at my age. The goal from day one was to build a team in order to work together. Of course, with me as the leader, as the strategist, as the key decision maker, particularly in the early days, but to build a team that is able to commit to this shared vision. And it's different for each company. So at 3ev, we are very proud of the fact that in our Series A transaction, which is closing this month, We have the support of Mahanagar Gas, the PSU, which is based in Maharashtra, based in Mumbai, as our lead investor. That is not purely a financial investment. That is a strategic investment where MGL has demonstrated the vision, the future readiness to take a mature, highly profitable, well-respected gas distribution company and begin to invest in electricity, electric mobility as something that is coming in the future in a big way. And that is not only their interest in 3EV Industries as a manufacturer of electric vehicles, particularly three-wheelers that they're very familiar with, but even more so the aftermarket services that 3EV does. And we can talk a little bit about the 3V business model if you'd like through the next questions. But the aftermarket component of 3V Industries is absolutely critical, from battery as a service, where we
Hmm.
provide battery rentals to customers so that we can manage their capex cost up front when they're acquiring the vehicle, but then pay as you go for the batteries. Also for safety, also for convenience, where they can be utilizing different type of battery capacities for different
Hmm.
ranges at different times or different uses. Also, our maintenance and service capabilities, which are mandatory for the vehicles to maintain industry leading uptimes. And then we
Okay.
also have the conversion business, which helps to
Got it.
drive the adoption at lower costs. So,
Okay.
with Mahanagar Gas as our lead investor through the Series A, I think we have a very strong stakeholder and we have a very clear strategic plan for the business to scale up and grow. And it's not clear whether a public listing is something that we will pursue as a board, but certainly Mahanagar Gas, with their great experience and resources in the public markets, will give us valuable insights as to whether that is the exit strategy and liquidity strategy for some of our early investors, or whether there are other scenarios to consider. Now, when it comes to 3 Ecosystems, which is also in the process of completing its Series A transaction, where in this very difficult funding market over the past year, we have succeeded. You'll be the first actually to break this news too.
Lovely.
But we will be closing the Series A transaction at a 20 million US dollar fundraise,
Amazing.
which exceeded our expectations in terms of the targeted amount. So we're very pleased with that. We're very proud of that, and we're very grateful to our shareholders coming in to support us. Given the addressable market that 3 Ecosystems is addressing, and given the uniqueness of that business model, which again we can talk about in more detail, I think ultimately the path of 3 Ecosystems, before 2030, within the next 5 years, is to pursue a public listing. I think that we have the scale, we have the size, and we have the distinctiveness in our business to pursue a leadership position in the marketplace, which is still highly fragmented. We want to be the ones to set the standards and to demonstrate the unique service capabilities that we have to serve our enterprise customers and other related customers. And as we do that, we believe that profitability is within reach within the next 12, let's say 18 months. And upon reaching that milestone, the scalability of that business becomes quite exciting. So we would be disappointed, so to speak, if we were not in a position to pursue a public listing within the next 3 to 5 years.
Nice. Great. I would like to understand what 3EV and 3Eco would be doing practically visible to people in terms of what kind of vehicles you would be manufacturing after 5 years, what would be the
Yes,
numbers, and in 3Eco, when you are suppose you are leasing vehicles to people, right, and to the corporates maybe. So what would be your company, both the companies doing
sure.
maybe like 5 years?
Yeah, just to really bring it down to earth in answering your question. When we talk about 3V Industries, right now we have a capacity to produce 300 vehicles a month. Now, maybe that seems very modest, especially compared to some other OEMs that have larger stated capacities, even startup companies that are having capacities in the thousands per month. But let's be clear, nobody is selling thousands of three-wheeler category L5 EVs every month. The go-to-market strategy that 3EV has had has proven highly successful, where we haven't invested in dealers and distributor models, where we only build to order, where we already know that the customer is there ready to purchase the vehicles. That has allowed us to be very capital efficient. We want to scale from the current capacity over the next 5 years, let's say, where we will have capacity to produce well in excess of 1 to 2,000 vehicles per month, which will keep us as a not a number one OEM in the EV space, but where we will have a very strong niche in both cargo and passenger vehicles, serving premium customer fleet operators. It's a B2B business. We will not be in the B2C space. We
Okay.
are not making two wheelers, which are consumer centric. We are not making four wheelers, which have enterprise and consumer customers. We are going to stick to our three-wheeler focus. We have, extremely successful and powerful ICE internal combustion engine OEMs in the three-wheeler space. I don't have to mention the names, we all know them.
Yeah.
So to say that we can't become a huge success in the category L5 three-wheel electric vehicle space, I think is not fully understanding the opportunity in the marketplace. So we want to scale up to those numbers, and I'm going to be conservative on purpose because I don't like to overpromise. But that will still keep us not as the number one because we have these large incumbent OEMs that I have to respect. I'm not going to say that we're ever going to displace these guys in the near future, but we certainly have a place to compete and to serve our customers in that space. But very importantly, 3EV Industries provides a full turnkey solution for EV mobility. That aftermarket aspect of the business, battery as a service or BaaS, that maintenance and service infrastructure where we have, more than 100 technicians supporting an installed vehicle base of close to 2,000 vehicles today. That is critically important, and it's a real strong revenue driver and value creation driver for us because those are all recurring revenues. And by the time we are looking at 5 years from now, I can confidently say that more than 50% of our revenues will be derived from recurring sources of battery as a service and maintenance work
Hmm.
versus selling vehicles. Of course, we're going to grow that. That's going to be very important for us. But what we found just this year, 2025, is that customers are coming to us on an unsolicited basis, reverse inquiries, to provide battery services and provide maintenance and service contracts for vehicles that were not even produced by 3EV. And that tells me two things. Number one, customers need that level of support. EV customers, EV fleet operators, they don't have available aftermarket support. If it's batteries, if it's servicing vehicles that have broken down or require maintenance. And that's a gap in the marketplace that 3EV has now built a reputation around. So seeing those two things and really bringing some focus in on those two things is giving us a lot of confidence as we grow the business into the future.
Great.
Now, shifting to 3 ecosystems,
Hmm.
that's a pure service business. We are operating in many local marketplaces they're almost like standalone. You know, when we are providing enterprise level services in Baifanali in Bangalore, and then we are providing services maybe even to the same customer, but it's in Andheri and Bombay, in Mumbai. They're far apart, right?
Yeah.
And the way that the work is done before 3 ecosystems entered into the picture, there was they could have been on different planets as far
Hmm.
as the people are concerned. They had no connectivity. There was no relationship between the two operations. Building a corporate entity that ties together all these local neighborhoods, all these what we call hyper local marketplaces or ecosystems, because our enterprise customers, whether it's Flipkart, which is one of our most valued customers, or Big Basket, which is one of our oldest customers, or Amazon, or Decathlon, or the platform companies like Porter, or Rapido, or Uber, and others, 3PLs, in addition. They want to operate simultaneously in multiple cities, but having the boots on the ground, having the infrastructure, having the management, having the resources that can be managed with high efficiency and productivity. That's missing in the marketplace. I talked about a gap in the marketplace when it came to aftermarket in the case of an EV OEM. The gap in the marketplace when it comes to local logistics is really about command and control. How can I go to Flipkart and say, the services we're giving you in Baifanali, we're going to give you the same thing in Andheri,
Hmm.
and we're going to give you the same thing in Hyderabad, in Coimbatore, in Chennai, and we're going to do it consistently. That is an information challenge. That is an IT problem, information technology challenge. Having command and control over your resources and having the dedicated resources so that we can actually fulfill our commitments to our enterprise customers. That requires a lot of information, a lot of information accuracy, a lot of information processing, and then a lot of control over the implementation and the management of our resources. We have already established two things at 3 Ecosystems. One is the technical proof of concept that an electric three-wheeler can be profitable in a business setting.
Okay.
It can earn its cost of capital.
Mhm.
That is not the case for many other fleet operators. They have not yet figured out how do you make money with an EV. It's supposed to be cheaper to operate, but I'm not seeing it in my finances, right? How do you make this happen? Well, we have proven that technically an EV is able to perform the work, and commercially an EV fleet is capable of being profitable.
Wow.
With
Lovely.
that, yeah, with that, obviously we want to scale, and the addressable market for our services is well in excess of 160 billion US dollars just in India alone.
Great. Amazing. So when you started, you have built two companies. One is 3EV, one is 3eco. And generally what I have seen is key people either are manufacturing vehicles or people are only running the fleets. Right. So why did you choose both the business wherein it's really difficult to build two businesses at a time? And obviously you would have a lot of experience in your past about managing several businesses at a time.
Sure.
I'd like to understand more about this.
Sure. And they are two completely different businesses. Of course, I'm responsible for founding both, and we do have different management teams for each business. We have different lead investors through our Series A in each business. Each business has a different business model, a way to make money, different margin structure, different scalability metrics, different addressable markets in terms of the overall scale that they can achieve. So they're different businesses, but why did I, like you said, why try to build two companies? Why not just pick one? Well, if we were manufacturing ICE vehicles, there's a very mature marketplace ecosystem. If I have a four-wheel light commercial vehicle, let's say a Tata Ace, and it breaks down, 10 people are there in 5 minutes to fix it for me. If there's an EV and I have a problem, it stops working, in 10 days nobody has shown up. Right?
Mm.
There's no ecosystem. It's still
Yes.
an emerging, developing, early stage marketplace. We know that it is technology driven. We know that it is future ready, that it is important for environmental sustainability. It is important for efficiency because electrical devices are more efficient than mechanical devices. We know these things in principle, but implementing that in real terms, that required what we call a partner ecosystem, where manufacturing the vehicle and then knowing how to properly utilize that vehicle in a commercial business setting. That was important. And 5, 6 years ago, when I started off, and why did I even target the EV space to begin with? Well, I targeted the EV space because I had experience as an investor, not only in the emerging, EV marketplace globally since the late 1990s when Toyota started off with the Prius, and there were some other experiments in the EV space, but also the power electronics, the battery technology, all of the associated, affiliated, ancillary marketplaces and technologies that needed to grow up in order to build a robust EV platform. I mean, remember the first EV that was operating in India was operating with lead acid batteries.
Mm.
Uh, that was close to 20 years ago now. But look at how much the marketplace has changed, and we're still in the early stages. So mapping out the entire value chain from knowing what kind of vehicle to make and then knowing how to build a business to use that vehicle that can become profitable. That required a lot of sharing of information and coordination between the OEM and
Yeah.
then the service provider.
Hmm.
And that couldn't be done kind of at an arm's length market based relationship. That couldn't be done in a disintermediated model of, let's say, maybe using gig workers and maybe using kind of a market based aftermarket support system of charging network operators and battery manufacturers, and then selecting a group of OEMs to manufacture the vehicles themselves. In order to make it work properly, we had to map the entire value chain from end to end. But starting
Okay.
at the end, what is the actual use case for an electric category L5 EV? Starting with cargo, because we launched this business in 2020,
Hmm.
which is right when COVID happened.
Hmm.
So passenger vehicles were obviously not going to be at a very high utilization during that period. But cargo was really exploding in terms of demand. So starting with cargo, understanding what are the use cases. And we spoke with the likes of Amazon and Big Basket and Ninja and Flipkart, and even bricks and mortar retailers like Decathlon, which had to pivot during COVID times because as a bricks and mortar company, they had to have a delivery model in order to sustain themselves because customers were not shopping in their stores at that time. So we engaged with a lot of different customers and we tried to understand, well, everybody is talking about EV fleets being the future. Well, how do we actually make that happen? Well, they have to be high performing because when they have to be heavy duty, because when you look at what are the needs, there were no ICE three wheelers performing the services for those companies because we didn't invent delivery. Delivery has been there for
Yeah.
years. Like we
Yes.
weren't coming in and saying this is a new thing. What's new is we're using EVs, but the customers, the demand, the marketplace, it was there already. So what are we matching up against? Well, what we're matching up against is that light commercial vehicle on four wheels, that diesel truck, that Tata Ace, for instance, or the like. So we have to compete with that. How do we build a vehicle that can do that work and not just do it as well, but do it with some benefits, some value? How does the customer benefit in order to make that decision to use an EV fleet? And then how do you use that EV feed properly? So that was the beginning of the research and thought process that led to 3V manufacturing heavy duty vehicles, long range, large payloads in terms of loading capacity of 550 kgs, large volumetric capacity. The first vehicle we built, 120 cubic feet of volumetric capacity, where competitors, this was back in 2020, were only making vehicles with a standard 80 cubic feet of volumetric capacity because that was the standard for three-wheel cargo vehicles.
Okay.
But that was not the standard for four-wheel light commercial vehicles, right? So we were matching those specifications. And then how to then use those vehicles in a commercial setting, well, it wasn't a plug and play. You
Hmm.
sell the vehicle and the customer knows how to use it. They don't know what batteries to use. They don't know what's the maintenance protocols. They don't know how much weight to put into the vehicles, how much range is possible, how to engage with customers based on what commercial commitments and terms to engage in those, how to do it at a corporate level, which was important in order to secure large enterprise customers, how to do it with a lot of confidence, planning for the future. That means long-term contracts. How do we, you know, buying an electric vehicle is expensive. One of the things that I mentioned to investors when we're explaining kind of what's different about operating an EV business. Imagine talking to a logistics fleet operator who's running, maybe they're running a Tata Ace or they're running some other light commercial vehicle that runs diesel. Imagine if when you and that vehicle should run for 10 years. That's a kind of an industry standard.
Yeah.
Imagine that you when you go to buy the vehicle, they present you with the bill and you're not just paying for the vehicle, but you have to pay for the fuel for the next 8 years out of the 10. You have to pay for it now.
Yeah.
It would be a huge challenge. Well, that's exactly what happens when you buy an EV. Because when you buy an EV, you're also purchasing the battery. And most of the battery cost is not the electricity, it's the battery chemistry itself. And that represents almost 80% of the total cost of fueling that EV, charging that EV, operating that EV for 10 years. You have to pay that up front.
Yeah.
When that is realized, when you have that understanding, it's not a plug and play substitution. It's not, oh, I can buy this ICE vehicle or I can buy an EV and they're going to cost me about the same. No, they don't cost the same. This is going to be more expensive on the EV side up front. But if you operate it properly over that 10-year period of time, when you compare that ICE vehicle and you compare it to that EV vehicle, the
Okay.
cost over 10 years for the ICE is here, and the cost for the EV is here. It's much cheaper to operate, but you
Yeah.
have to operate it properly. And that was
Yes.
the understanding as we created 3 ecosystems, that it wasn't just, oh, we have, ICE fleet operators and we can just do what they're doing, but just swap it out for an EV. No, you had to rethink the entire business and you had to
Hmm.
build it from the bottom up based on an EV business model, understanding the very large advantages in terms of efficiency, in terms of performance that an EV could provide, but also understanding the challenges, particularly in terms of the cash flow profile.
Wow, great. So there is a very, very deep and complex thinking that is required when you are planning any business model. And what I could understand is that just building an EV or building a vehicle was not the solution that you saw. What you saw is after building up the vehicle, when it goes to the road or to the market, people may or may not be aware about the usage of the vehicle. So you ensured that usage also should be under your control, so that either you are able to train people how to use an EV and
Yeah, that's right. A businessman, an investor, someone who is not purchasing the vehicle for personal use. Nobody's driving their children to school in a three-wheel L5, right?
yeah.
Someone else is driving the vehicle. They're the passenger in the back, or maybe it's shipping around cargo. So when you're talking about business people, I mean, they're in the business to make money, and you have to give them a value proposition. You have to say, well, why, right? Why should you use this versus what you've been using and everybody else? It has to be a clear value proposition. And in order to do that, what we set out to do in the beginning at 3V Industries was not to sell products, but to sell solutions. You know, what is your problem statement?
Hmm.
How do we address bottlenecks, inefficiencies, productivity limitations in your business? How do we then use the technology of an EV platform to alleviate some of those pain points, to create greater opportunities, to drive business growth, to drive business profitability? That has always been our mindset from day one, is selling solutions and not products at this stage of the marketplace. So there's also, we are not just coming up with this out of the blue. Also, the wealthiest man in the world, we all know his name. We all know the company. It's an EV company, Tesla. And when they set out to grow that business 20 years ago, they had no dealers. Tesla had to fund and build their own dealerships. There were no third party dealers that were willing to sell electric vehicles. Teslas, they had no idea how to sell it. They had no idea how to service these vehicles. There was no insurance company that would insure these vehicles. How can you insure the vehicle? We don't know. What is the safety profile? What is the longevity? What is the resale value, right? There were no companies to finance these vehicles. How do we know what the collateral value is? How do we know what the aftermarket, prices will be? Which are all critical for those very mature businesses. And that was in the consumer space where Teslas were being sold to regular consumers. But they had to build internally that ecosystem. And if that company did anything,
Hmm.
they did that right. They understood, in order for someone to buy an electric vehicle, they had to understand where all the parts that were needed, financing, insurance, serviceability, dealership, where do I actually test drive this thing? It all had to be created in order for that vehicle to be a success. And it has been a success, as we all know. At 3V Industries, we understood that and more. In India, there are certain, specific support measures that were needed from a safety standpoint, from a reliability standpoint, from an educational standpoint of sharing information. As we went to penetrate the market, it was not just about building a product and then assuming, because of government subsidies, because of government targets, because of customers saying, oh, we need 10,000 EV fleet, We didn't put any stock in that as a driver of demand of our business. We knew only when the customer was convinced and confident they had a solution that provided value. That's when we would be able to, penetrate the market with our products.